Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Compact Bijou with Craig Lippett just joining us. Craig, can you hear us from the UK or Wales, which is similar? No, we're still waiting for his voice. That means I can throw abuse at him now for this whole thing, and he won't be able to react other than by the miracle of hand signals. And what you can probably see that Gene, Craig, the silent movie for the evening, Chad Kapper, and some bloke from New Zealand on the end, but don't know who he is. This old bloke hangs around like he hangs around parks. But anyway, I understand. Well, let's not understand anything. Chad, you wrote about the hype curve, and I think I got the wrong end of the stick. But the bottom line is, you think that FPV is on that curve and it's going mad and it's all going to be all right, and I disagree. Maybe you'd like to disagree with me.
I love to disagree.
Oh no, you're like a drone lawyer. That's it. Go ahead.
Where would you like me to start?
Well, how do you think? Where you think it's already? You already think it's been rising and it's coming to the bottom of the curve and it's going to jump up onto the plateau soon. Are you sure that many people are doing?
Because what I'm talking about is the hype curve, not necessarily the, there's other curves as well, like a product life cycle. And I think maybe people are getting that confused. The hype curve is kind of the initial introduction of things. So if you look at mini quads, and pretty much, wouldn't you agree that all the major players that have anything to contribute to mini quads are already involved?
Yeah, I'd agree with you there.
Okay, so they're all aware of it. So you can't reintroduce the mini quad. You can introduce a larger platform, you can introduce something else, but as far as mini quads in the format that currently exists, it can only be introduced once. And that was the initial hype. And that was last year. And that's when you saw all that activity. You saw Dubai pump a bunch of money into it. You got DRL, DR1, Drone Champions League. All these entities went out last year and hit it big. And then this year, it's crickets. And it's because we started hitting that lull. We started hitting the, what they call the trough of disillusionment. And I believe that's what we're in the middle of right now.
But isn't that really quick for those sort of hype curves and all that sort of thing? Obviously, I'm getting the one that you're alluding to wrong. But aren't you going through it rather quickly? Is it some sort of FPV time?
Well, I don't think that it's not. I think they're all independent. I mean, I think not every technology has the same length of time, and this isn't necessarily specifically a technology, it's an innovation. It's a collection of other technologies, a mini quad, and it's just that configuration of it. You change that configuration, you go to Freedom class, and that's a different one. That hype has not happened yet. So if you want to group it all together and average it, yeah, then you could argue that the trough is in a different location, or in time. But if you're talking specifically mini quads, which I was speaking of, I would say that we're dead in the middle of the trough of disillusionment.
Isn't it? Because though, they are a great deal of fun, and my lads love them, and I enjoy having a go, but I'm rubbish. But I still enjoy having a go. It's good fun.
Right.
Is it not that they're not as easy to manage, or not as spectacular? My point was that it's not as spectacular as it needs to be, and we'll bring Bruce in a second because he knows how to save the world. But it's not as spectacular as it needs to be to really grab the public's attention.
Well, I think there's two sides to that. You have freestyle and you have racing, and they're not the same audience. Freestyle has found an audience on YouTube, which is flourishing. And it's growing much more rapidly than the audience for racing. So which side are you talking about? Because they both use the same format, but there's different audiences. So I think you could argue that there's a hype curve for each of those two entities. A mini quad for racing and mini quad for freestyle.
So where do you think the technology is going to go? Is that going to change and make things more exciting? And I agree. By freestyle, do you mean people going down the front of buildings and things like that, as against
Yep.
racing around? Yeah, as against racing around a course. I saw an amazing thing today. I saw someone's won a championship, and it was on a simulator. They call it augmented reality, but there were some championships that was all done on a sim, which amazed me. Anyway, Bruce, let's see. You know how to save the game here. You do a lot of FPV flying. We see it in your videos. How's it going to get more exciting? Is it where do you think first person view racing is?
Well, the whole thing is it's not a spectator sport in the conventional sense where everyone rolls up to a stadium and watches these little black dots fly around the sky, because it's boring as bat poo. Because all you can see is a little black, 210 millimeter frame, and you're about 200 meters away, and there's really not a lot of excitement. There's not much buzz. It surprised me actually that race event organizers, maybe they have, but I haven't seen it, haven't set up a thing so you change the spectator experience. You roll up to one of these events with your mates, you get your smartphone out, you download the app, and then you can check, on your smartphone, you can pick any of the live streams of people that are racing. So you're looking FPV yourself. You're in the stands and you can hear the noise and everything, but you're looking at your smartphone because that's what the FPV pilots see. So you become part of that piloting experience rather than just watching black dots fly around. Why don't we have setups like that at every race, at every freestyle event, so people get the first person view and not the sort of watching this little black dot? That's got to be one of the key strategies. Use the technology to enhance the spectator experience. And also, we're not focused enough on personalities. If you look at Formula One, you've got Schumacher, Hamilton, everyone identifies with their favorite racing driver. But on the FPV racing scene, there's a few names, but people don't seem to be sort of identifying and forming little fan groups and in the same way that they form allegiances with motorsport drivers. So I think we've got to do that. And as Chad says, this is actually a much bigger experience than being there. It is an FPV. It's a YouTube experience. A lot of YouTube videos, they're getting 10,000 views, if you've got a good, within a week. But even that's a pretty small audience because so many people just don't know this whole thing exists. And I remember, it's a bit like the internet. When I started using the net back in about 1992, 93, I knew it was going to be big. And I was all hyped up. But it took 10 years to happen. I mean, the timeframes can sometimes, even with high tech, can be very long because you've got to create an awareness of what the product, what the sport is. And at the moment, we're just sort of right down at the bottom. There's a long time to go before people become aware of it and then develop those, individual pilot allegiances and the technology catches up. The technology for flying is great, but the technology for spectators, it's really crap. And that's the bit we've got to change, make it more attractive to people. What do you reckon, Gary?
I don't know. I was going to throw that back at Chad. Let's go back to Chad.
Well, I think Bruce has some really good points. And I have heard of some entities working on smartphone apps for that specific purpose. I don't think anybody's currently implementing it. I think there's some bottleneck issues. Like if it's actually running through the internet and you have 1,000 people at the event, you can have some bottleneck issues. So they got to figure out, are we running this Wi-Fi? Is it running through cell towers? Or, and what's the lag and all of that. But itself is awesome, and I think he's dead on. I think that's, I'm really quite surprised at how many events don't have monitors just everywhere. I mean, they're not expensive. You can go to Walmart and buy a monitor for $200, and to have lots of monitors available with multiple feeds, I think would be the key. We had gone over to Shanghai for a big race event, and they had big, huge monitors actually out on the field. So when you're watching it, you could actually see the big monitors out there and then pass by the monitors. Unfortunately, that particular event got shut down before it started, so we didn't get to experience it. But yeah, I think that's definitely the way that it will go eventually. How long it'll take, I have no idea.
Sorry, I'm butting in a little bit, but at Farnborough they did a pretty cool thing. The International Air Show, which has 75,000 people in the crowd there, as well as Spitfires and fast jets and all those other things going by. And Craig was there. He's still silent, Craig, by the way. Yes, good. That's how we like him. they had, I thought, a really cool thing that they had there was you could they in the cage sort of thing, they had two areas there, and the spectators could walk underneath a tunnel that the guys had to fly through. So you could, you know, you see the aircraft coming here and zips through the tunnel above your head, and I thought that was pretty cool. So imagining a course where the crowd is in the course as well. I mean, that really helps with with immersion and understanding and the sight and sound. So I thought that was pretty cool. It is a pity you can't comment on that. Can you comment, Craig, or you? No, you can't. Yes, I know. This is where we're all let down by not learning international sign language. I don't know what that meant. Did that mean is he going for a beer, a smoke? What did that mean? You know? Yeah. So there's ways that it can change. But why do you think it's in the trough then, Chad? I'm quite surprised that you don't think it's still it's not climbing hard still.
Well, I think because right now mini quads are at that. They're already well into the refinement stage. I mean, how many different ways can you cut a carbon fiber frame? And people are still coming out with new frames every week, and they're changing them like, you know, a millimeter. And, you know, they're squishing the X, so now it's a stretch. And you have all of these just minute changes where they're already well into the refinement stage. And I'm basing it a lot on the whole point of the hype cycle, or the concept of it is kind of the perception and attitude. And I can tell you right now, the attitude stinks. Like people are grumpy, and it's a little dark and scary right now. But you know, I've seen this before. It's you know,
well,
it
have you
happened
seen it before? Sorry.
So Flight Test was kind of at the head end of the front end of the whole hype of electronics, as far as like motors, gyros. Like there was kind of it's hard to nail it down to like one specific electronic, but it was the combination of, you know, right at the beginning of Flight Test was when, I mean, I built my first quadcopter in 2010, and it barely flew, and I put, I don't know how many hours into it. And David was making, you know, his tricopter with gyros. It didn't have a flight controller. It was actually using 4 gyros, and an amazing time. It was a boom of technology, and you had lipos that were getting smaller and more robust, and brushless motors were getting tuned in, and flight controllers were starting to emerge. So you had all of this where you could just create new flying aircraft. And so I don't know how to define that boom. And then scratch building obviously was really huge with Flight Test. You know, that was a big part of our business, was, you know, foam cut planes, which existed prior, but it just kind of exploded a couple years ago. And it does. It comes out strong, and then you have this letdown, you know, where people want to ride that high forever, and you can't. You know, eventually you get to that refinement stage, and you have to find the joy in the refinement. And then the next thing.
Sorry, after you. Sorry.
No, so the thing that's coming right now is long range. So long range existed before, but now they're applying it to mini quads, and for whatever reason, that's the really exciting thing right now.
But Chad, what do you think about the effect of regulation? Because that's something that's been a real damper in some countries anyway, on the hype thing. Suddenly people want to do this stuff, but they're not legally allowed to. And when you talk long range, that's obviously one of the key things beyond visual line of sight is verboten everywhere in the world. So it becomes difficult to champion something that is seen to be illegal by the powers that be. So how do you deal with that?
Well, my approach from the beginning, especially with Rotor Riot, was to mostly document the culture. So it wasn't, I'm not coming out with a long range system. You know, our guys are using them, and, you know, and then we experience in a sense. So I don't know. I mean, I have the same questions you do, but I look at it as a story unfolding right in front of me, and I like to capture the bits and pieces of that as we go. I mean, you know, it's really funny because you guys remember Tommy diving the buildings in Atlanta on, you know, last year. and everybody just lost their mind. Yet we had in our opening title sequence in our first, I don't know how many episodes, we had building dives already on the show, but for some reason that activity at that time hit a nerve, and people get all riled up. And we thought, oh, okay, you know, people are going to get in trouble. Steele and Schizo and Alex Edit, you know, they all got called into the cop's office for something else, and they got, you know, booked down. And in the end, the FAA ended up calling our guys in to ask for advice and say, hey, you know, what do you guys think about how these things should be done and regulated and things like that? So I give up trying to predict things like that, because you think it's going to go one way, you think things are just going to explode, and then it takes a left turn at the last moment. So, but that's what I love. I think that's the filmmaker in me. I like to watch this stuff play out and just let it surprise me around every corner. So that's not an answer to your question, other than it probably won't be what we expect.
Yeah, it was interesting. As I was, hello, I've got a big echo now. As I was saying, in respect to the, you know, making the FPV racing and that sort of thing a more of an experience, I think you've caught on to the fact that, and we're seeing it now with the number of videos coming out, it's more about the people than the racing or the freestyle or anything like that. I mean, there are some, I've watched some videos of some of the very best flyers, and I get a bit bored, to be honest, because once you've flipped and dived and rolled and, you know, is a different location, but it's sort of like, people are starting to hit a plateau. There's nothing much really exciting more to see, but the people who are doing this are the really exciting thing. That's what brings me back to watch the videos, is the people, the characters, the personality. You're bringing people in, you're making them a part of your family, and they feel an attachment and a loyalty to the people. They don't give a damn about the flips and rolls and all that sort of stuff. It's the people they want to see every week or every day on their screens, and that sort of, and the dialogue that things like YouTube can provide, because it's a two-way mechanism. It's not just dumping a video. You can also interact with your audience. I think those are the things that are going to make this a far more powerful pastime.
Well, and I think that's why freestyle, I believe, is a little further ahead than racing, as far as a kind of a, I don't know how to define it, but like a refined medium. Because freestyle is already there to where people can establish their channels, and we're already on kind of like the third or fourth generation freestyle. You know, like the first freestyle videos, they didn't call them freestyles, they just called them flying. Then people started racing, but then they started doing flips and rolls, and then it started to morph. So now there's a format. Like there's a vlog, there's a flying vlog, and there's a flying video. You know, and these are kind of becoming accepted formats, and you can watch people or replicate those formats. And I don't know, it's an exciting time for me. I love seeing this stuff unfold. I really do.
That's interesting that you're still taking it as exciting, even though you said, well, we think we're in the trough. Well, to rewind just a little bit, did you document that FAA interaction with your team?
No, because it wasn't. It had to do more with timing and time and space, like where I was, where they were. I mean, it's all documented on the internet, but you know, did I cover it in the show? I mean, some of it, you know, I get accused of creating drama a lot, and so we're often careful when something like that happens. You know, everybody's already aware of it because it's making the news and the social media and all that. So we tend not to overdo it or, you know, cover it additionally or whatever, because people feel like it gets beaten to death. And that's like events. We go to events all the time, but we don't actually make the videos for the events or cover the events, because about the time that we get back home and edit the video and put it out, they've already seen it 10 different times on social media. So aspect of it, but I do have, I mean, everything documented in some form or fashion on a hard drive.
Because that was a very interesting interaction. I know an event that you guys should attend actually in New Zealand next year, in probably about March or something like that. And we'll get Bruce to tell us more about that event a little bit later on. Do you like this? It's getting quite slick now, isn't it? Did you like that, Bruce? I've got that in there. Craig, did you manage to get any talking to us yet? No.
He's read only at the moment.
He's read only. Absolutely. So do you think? Well, all right. I suppose here's my point of reference. My 13-year-old lad. I saw he wrote the other day. What did he write on some bit of on his notebook, like you do? FPV 365 24/7, something like that. So my 13-year-old lad's definitely going to be doing FPV for a while. But I wonder if you think there's longevity in the racing or freestyle side of things. I've seen some amazing flying. I've seen some extraordinary freestyle flying here. A lad came and flew here, and I was just blown away. But I'm just, it's quite a skill, isn't it? And is there enough? Are there enough youngsters out there to keep it going?
So yeah, you asked me a good question. You said, why am I positive? Well, one, I knew it was coming going into it. Like I knew we would hit a high and then a lull. What I didn't know was what it would look like or how long it would take. I just knew it was coming. So as long as we're in the high, I knew the lull was coming. And now that we're in the lull, I know we're coming out of it. I have the confidence there as I was huge into paintball back in the early 90s, late 80s. And that was the paintball boom, or, it started probably somewhere around 82, somewhere around there. And when I got into it was probably about the hype, era. It was the late 80s, early 90s. And I was just consumed with it. And I loved it. And I just, and later on in the 90s, when it finally made it on the ESPN, we all thought, this is it. It's going to rock the world. It's going to be the next, it's going to be in the Olympics. It's going to, we had all these, how amazing it was going to be. And it went, and it just kind of drifted along. And I always wondered, why didn't it take hold? And if you really think about it, I mean, one, it kind of revolves around guns, so you're already segmenting a lot of people that don't want anything to do with any type of gun. Two, it's very painful and very physical. Three, it relies on good weather. There's so many conditions for good experience at this. Yet it went quite a ways, and there was still quite a decent sized hobby industry around that. Well, mini quads are much more accessible and more, what do I want to say, more interested in it immediately rather than having, to work up to it. So it has a broader appeal. It's like racing. Racing to drive a car, so you can relate to racing. Well, drones are becoming, I think they'll be very commonplace within 3 to 5 years. Everybody's aware of a drone, what it is. They have a toy. Almost everybody you talk to knows somebody that has a drone, or they've flown one at some point. Becoming so relatable, I think, the natural progression of that is, well, what can we do with it? And, there's going to be people that want to take pictures and take video, but then there's people that are going to want to, go have fun and perform. And I think, and it favors there. You have racing and you have freestyle. You have the artists and you have the competitors. So I think it's just so rich as far as its offering. I believe it's here to stay because, if you showed somebody golf for the first time today and none of us knew what golf was, you would be like, who in the hell is going to watch that? But to Bruce's point, you know who the players are, and you start to care about them, and their nuances, and if I just told you about or somebody, and I just said, hey, look, and this and this about him, and this is where he went to school, you'd be like, I don't care. It's slowly, you understand the context makes it important. Quite hit that stage publicly, but we have within our little community. Like all the pilots know each other, and they know. And when you come into the community, they tell you, they say, hey, oh, you got to watch La Drib and Gap It, and and they tell you who to watch and why they're important. And so I think
is that the piece of the message that's missing? There's user. Oh, sounds like I'm going to have a pop at you now. But is that where you need to tighten up the storytelling message? Then is that where you need to get that out? Sorry, this does sound really. Do you need to do a better job of getting that out?
It's a good question. I mean, I always think I can always do a better job. So, yes, but that's the nut we're trying to crack is, what does that look like? Actually, one of the things we were just discussing over the past few weeks is we're going to be developing a beginner series, because Rotor Riot started as kind of the elite, or the kind of the original gang of these mini quad pilots. But what happens eventually after you've been established, your audience starts to evolve, and the expert pilots diminish. Like you can only have a finite amount of expert pilots, but newcomers and multiply. So what are they going to do? They're going to go out and say, okay, what's relevant? And then they're going to look at what's relevant, and they're going to say, I want to do that. Where do they go then? So I think that's what we want to work on next, is when somebody just walks into this, where's their informational starting point? That's a little more structured than of Google or YouTube searches.
And I think you are sort of almost aiming for the Top Gear model, shall we say, for Rotor Riot. And I know,
well, it was always the aim, but we didn't always have the budget. So that's the problem. We've established that we're going to pump out content every week, and it's not easy. It's not easy to maintain that level of production quality, and our only revenue stream is the same revenue stream that any or product developer would have, yet we're producing high quality content and traveling around the world. And because we do that, people have this perception that we're just rolling in money, and it's really just a lot of very strategic alignments. Somebody will say, well, hey, we want you to come promote this, and we'll say, okay, well, why they pay for our travel there, and then we go get episodes while we're in that location, or something. And
well, that's a perfect moment to say, have you ever considered traveling to New Zealand?
Yes, I would love to.
Then Bruce, let me just bring you in, Bruce. Would there be an opportunity early next year for them to travel to New Zealand, and where might they go, and is it happening, and how are things going with your gig?
Let me just check my diary. Yes. Obviously, we're trying to plan a very large event here in early or next summer New Zealand time, which is winter Northern Hemisphere time. Of course, there's been a lot of resistance to that. And this brings me back to something we were talking about. I think one of the best analogues for the mini-quad scene at the moment is skateboarding, because it's another thing. It had a big, massive start. There was this hype and everything. Everyone was into skateboarding. And today, well, it must be like 40, 50 years later, people are still using skateboards, and it's still a big industry. And you've still got names like Tony Hawk that people associate with the sport. And so I think mini quads are probably going to follow a curve probably quite similar to that. And just that every kid has a skateboard these days. And in time to come, I think most kids will have a drone, and whether they use it for freestyle or for photography, whatever, is not important. The fact they'll have one. But it's interesting, talking back to this event we have here, our local town council have just invested, or just said they're going to invest $600,000 in creating a skate park. But they are not at all keen on us having drone racing here, because we don't understand it. So there's part of the lag we have is old people who are living in the past. But I've got a meeting hopefully this week with the council to try and resolve the final bits and pieces of this meeting, because we can't have it without their permission, because it's on an airfield and we need to make some certain logistic changes or legal changes to the status of the airfield. Or we'd have the situation where we had, you know, Final Glide and Tommy and all these other fantastic drone flyers out here doing their stuff, and they'd have to be supervised by Team Nana, you know, which is kind of stupid. It makes a mockery of the whole regulatory system.
But
So,
when you have,
yeah.
wouldn't you have enough spare hobbits and things like that to supervise?
No, but all the hobbits would have to have wings, and there's not many flying hobbits in this country, so you know, we're pretty buggered actually. But we want to try and get the thing organised. Lots of people have said they want to come, and all I can do is just keep people informed, because until we get our I's dotted and our T's crossed, we'll just, you know, that's where we're at. So if it was skateboarding, not a problem, but because there's evil mini quad flying, yeah, we got a few more problems. But as I say, we're working on it. It's all I can do.
Yes.
If there's anything we can do to help, Bruce, let us know, because we are all huge fans of yours. So it's really just this earth that's in between us.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I've tried everything, and as I say, it's a last-ditch effort this week, and if needs be, I haven't thought, because I can bring quite a bit of pressure to bear on certain elements by leaning on my subscriber base. Interestingly enough, just as I had an email from CAA this morning, our local regulator, saying, thanks for your help in promoting the survey while it was available. It no doubt helped push the total number of respondents to over 1,200. So our local regulator recently did a survey to try and get feedback from the RPAS community, and I did a video saying, hey, go and make a submission. So for a country of this population, 1,200 responses is pretty impressive when you compare to what other countries have got in response to this similar surveys. So I can sort of bring a lot of force to bear on things like this, but unfortunately, when you're dealing with people who have their own agendas and are not interested in listening, it doesn't matter how loud you shout at them, they will just ignore you. So we'll see what happens.
Shane, well,
you got to find out what they want. Wrap what you want around it.
What was that, Chad? I missed the first bit of that.
You got to find out what they want, and then you need to wrap what you want around it. The whole pill.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think they know what they want. That's the problem.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. You've got such a great venue there, and for all practical purposes, it makes no sense what their position. Let me just check in and let's see, Craig.
I'm sorry.
Go on.
So, and Tony Caballero is, I think he might be getting into drones. What if you could do something to where you had a popular skater show up, but it was only with the contingency of having some drone thing? I don't know, but that's kind of what I'm talking about.
Yeah, we probably need to talk about this offline at some stage. So yeah, we'll have a chat and see what we can work out.
Well, happy days. Well, let's hope something happens there. Let's just check in with Craig. Craig, can you hear me over? No one else can hear him. It's not just me not hearing him, is it? No, we can't.
I kind of read it close.
Yeah, what was that? Yeah, I was going to add some words in for him then, but I better not. He was going to talk about operational safety cases, and the last part of it is the last. We've been running a series on SES News, and it's very good. And I could just make stuff up now, which I think I probably should. But I'm definitely going to say, yeah, that's right. Don't crash. Yes, look out for danger. Many other things. But one of the lines, I'm going to put it in I'm going to drop this line in anyway, and it's, there are no shortcuts to any place worth going. And I thought that was a fantastic line for anything you want. You could apply that anywhere, and I'm going to try my best to remember that. There are no shortcuts to any place worth going. It's a very, very good line, and it's only a pity that Craig's not with us in voice to unpack that line a little bit better. Gene, let's jump to Gene while Gene's here. Gene, you're a relaxed man at the moment. Have you got nothing to do? Have you got nothing better to be doing? Is nothing going on over there that needs your rescue services and attentions?
You know, they call it a hangout for nothing, you know, for a good reason. I mean, I'm just hanging out, you know, having a good time listening to you guys chatter away about little bitty drones that zoom around and do, you know, some cool things. And, you know, I'm chill. I'm laid back and waiting for the next crisis.
And well, sadly, what I think you mentioned earlier that Puerto Rico is appearing on your radar.
As a matter of fact, it is. You know, we're getting pretty good at infrastructure remediation, and those people got a 1-2 punch like we haven't seen in a while. That poor island is down for the count, and they're needing some help pretty badly. And yeah, we've looked at several things. As a matter of fact, I know personally of at least 2 people that are going down there to help with that. Now, you know, we as a company don't know yet, but it could happen. It could happen.
And that they really are. It is flattened, isn't it? So you'll be going into a situation where there is perhaps very little to no power. Does your dog grooming van, does that have its own power and things like that?
As a matter of fact, Puppy Feet 1 is self-contained, and it has a 7.5 kW generator on it. It does not swim well, though. I mean, so that would be a problem getting it across that little bit of water that is in between the islands, you know. So yeah, it's going to be one of those logistics problems that'll have to be solved too.
Well, that almost you led nicely into my point there. If you can't pick up that van and put it onto a boat, you don't have to answer this. I'm sorry, I'm being rude again. But does your operation center around having that operation center, or do you have enough gear to put in? Because you had that fantastic radio link and things like that. Can you move all that around in cases and take it away, or does it make it a lot harder? I mean, what does that mean for your
backpacks? You know, the solar chargers and generators, and you know, on and on and on ad nauseum. You know, you can get it in there and get a lot of good data collection done on the fly, and pretty much self-sustained. It doesn't take a real big footprint, but you do have to think about it a little bit.
Yeah, so you say infrastructure remediation. Would that be water again for you?
It could be. We're doing a lot of environmental stuff, but you know, infrastructure is a lot of different things. It's communications, it's water, it's electricity, it's you know, all of the use cases that we've come up with and talked about on, you know, on and on about what you could use a drone for is, I mean, we're essentially doing the same thing, but we're starting from scratch pretty basically, going out and doing inventory on, you know, what's been knocked down or what's usable and what's not usable. So we're kind of extending that whole utilities inspection thing to something that encompasses damage assessment and, you know, what you can salvage and what you can't.
And do you think there's much of a base map to go on there? You know, I mean, are you going to be mapping this stuff for the first time in maybe 30 years? Maybe they don't really have a good map of how it's all strung out.
You know, that's a good question. I haven't even thought about that, Gary. I mean, we're kind of used to going in with things all in disarray and scattered about. So I haven't really thought about that part of it, but it could be that that's the case. Could be old maps, you know, who knows? Because
that moving forward, and hopefully we have less and less events that require emergency deployments, but moving forward, we'd hope that continual measuring and flying of critical infrastructure will allow us to have a better base map of that infrastructure and what it looks like when it doesn't look right, because that'll basically be it, won't it?
You know, you talk about emergency deployments and that sort of thing, but if you look at Haiti, you know, what happened in Haiti there was relief efforts that took place for months and months and months after that event. And I think we're going to see much the same thing with Puerto Rico as well. It's going to take months to get them back to any sense of what we consider normalcy.
Have you still got teams in Texas?
We got what?
Have you still got your guys are still down at Houston?
No, actually, 19 days was our final day, and we've come back remediated, or not remediated, but refit and and gotten ready to go again. So no, but we do know that there are still operations going on in Houston that are using drones, and that's going to go on for a while as well. I don't know if the FAA has been as lenient with the ECOAs. I haven't heard anything about that, but I think, like us, we still have COAs that are in effect. They gave us 30 days. So if we needed to go back down there now, we could go back down there and fly again, no problem. I think that's the way they've treated most folks down there.
It's funny speaking to the FPV and those little mini quads that you mentioned just now and all that. A friend of mine's getting into critical infrastructure inspection here, and he's never really been a flyer. He's not come from the model world, and he has started his stick skills beginning to go through the roof because he's using a mini quad to practice and muck about with. So it's a double-edged thing. He's enjoying the flying, he's mucking about with it and having fun, and his actual flying skills, they're shooting up. You know, they're much better than, again, if Craig could speak, then a lot of people I see that are trained in the training world, and all they can do is take off in a GPS mode and put something roughly near a tower over there, you know, and the nose is going to be facing it and whatever. Whereas somebody like one of the many youngsters, that's where I think FPV will help the commercial world until it all goes completely autonomous, is they will be the lads that come up from FPV Racing, be it freestyle or whatever, will be much better pilots, and they'll be much better at doing the inspections and stuff like that, and their spatial awareness will be much better. And you know, when I rule the world and they came to me with their experience and their videos on YouTube or whatever, I'd be very quickly be able to work out what their CV really looked like, rather than I've got this shiny bit of paper from the Institute of I'm super cool. It'd be much better.
You know, we do quite a bit of training in public safety, folks. You know that. That's what we're in the business of doing more than anything else. And you know what we have found to be absolutely one of the best tools to teach somebody the fundamental flying is, you remember those little Estes guys that are about that big around? You know, they're little bitty drones. You have to fly them. There are no sensors on them. They barely level themselves. And we put those in the hands of our students until, yeah, there you go. Yeah. And we tell them, this is what you're going to learn to fly with. And, chase the cat around the house, do whatever you need to do, try to steer away from the ceiling fan and that sort of thing. But it teaches them how to fly. And that's the most important thing, because we always stress, what are you going to do when the GPS goes out? What are you going to do when the gyro quits? Are you going to be able to switch it to, P mode and, take it over and fly it back? Or are you just going to go, oh, there goes, sorry, something went wrong. So, yeah, the little guys, it doesn't take a whole lot to learn how to fly with these. You don't have to spend a bunch of money, and you can still get pretty proficient.
Yeah, absolutely. What your training courses then, or your training, Chad, what sort of level of equipment are you going to assume that the person has to start with? You're going to have this is your day one machine, a recommended machine?
Yeah, I'd like to, because, we pay attention to the people that get in and that are fresh. And that's what we've noticed is over the past 6 months or so, a lot of the people interacting have just entered, 3 to 6 months ago. And, it's by watching videos, and they might still be watching videos. There's a lot of people who have been and part of our community and in our group purchased anything yet. I would take it from, just the very beginning, and there'll probably be multiple paths, because some people, want to start small and simple. Some people want to start on a simulator. Some people want to start real world. Some people want to jump right into it, and they don't care how much money or how much time or whatever. They just want to jump into it, crash, and just start working on it. So I want to be able to have adjustable paths depending on the type of people that they are.
And Bruce, what do you reckon? Where would you start? Where's your starting point to get into this world?
Well, I've always said, just as Gene said, get yourself a little cheap drone. You can fly it inside when it's raining. You fly it at night. You can do whatever you like. It teaches you basically the muscle memory, the eye-hand coordination. And for $30, $40, whatever it is, you're not risking your big floaty balloon camera drone, and I don't know how many people have rolled up out at the field where I am with expensive big drones and said, oh, can you teach me to fly? And I've said, no, go away and learn yourself on one of these little toys. And they do, and they're happy they did, because, you know, they do have that extra level of skill needed for, as Gene says, when something goes wrong and nothing's working like the book says it should, you've got that extra reserve of skill and ability to actually save not only the craft, but perhaps prevent a nasty incident. Can you think of any nasty incidents that have happened recently, Gary?
Now let me think. I was going to lead into that in another way, because I was going to say, Gene, I don't know if you saw that I put up a little video last week. There was a chap flying over 3 Black Hawks on the ground, and then one flew across his nose as he was flying there. And then, praise be to the gods of YouTube, somebody managed to hit one. I'd already put that video out. Right. Anyway, that's another thing altogether. Yeah. Well, how you've led us into that, Bruce? Do you want to start unpack? How are we going to unpack that? You think it's a good thing? Let's start with your opinion. You think it's a good thing? Over to you, the man from the future.
Yeah. We all knew that at some stage a drone, a recreational multi-rotor drone, was going to hit a manned aircraft. If you read the Daily Mail, I'm surprised that when the entire world hasn't burst into flames, but it happened, and the result was that, you know, a few scuffs on the helicopter. Okay, it was a hardened military helicopter, a Black Hawk, so you'd expect it to be pretty immune to that sort of thing. But it did show that despite all the fear-mongering, the helicopter didn't fall to the ground, everyone didn't die, and it is a really good thing because we have a data point. We have just one data point, but we have a data point. Now, if you look in the past, this is the first verified instance of a recreational multi-rotor drone striking a manned aircraft, and until now, we've made all sorts of rules and regulations on nothing more than assumption. But now we have a data point. So people have said to me, oh, you can't draw these conclusions from a single data point. And my response is, but we've made so many regulations with no data points. So a single data point is infinitely better than none. So now we can start looking at things realistically and appreciate the fact that a collision or an incident involving a recreational multi-rotor drone and a manned aircraft doesn't necessarily involve death and destruction. It gives us an ability to look at this, and it's been about 5 years since multi-rotor drones came on the market as a go and buy it from Best Buy type of product. So we can now quantify the risk by saying there's been one incident in 5 years. Previously, there'd been no incident, so you couldn't quantify that risk period in terms of probability because nothing had happened. But now, 1 in 5 years, that is the historical probability. Now we can start looking at that and saying, well, okay, how does that compare to being struck by lightning? Well, every year, several people in the USA are killed by lightning strikes, but there's only been one collision in 5 years. And what about the likelihood of being injured by a piece of space rock? Well, in the last 5 years or 6 or 7 years, hundreds of people were hospitalized in Chelyabinsk when a meteor blew up over the thing. So you're more likely to be injured by a meteor than have a drone strike your manned aircraft. And even if it does strike your manned aircraft, the chances of damage or injury are minimal. And this is backed up even further because I noticed in the media this week there was a Boeing 737 landing at Khartoum International Airport. It had a bird strike, and the damn thing was nearly destroyed by a bunch of birds. So this is still the biggest problem. We've got $400 million a year worth of damage caused by bird strikes in the USA alone, and we've had one incident with a recreational drone that did very little in respect to the helicopter that it hit. So now we can bring some rational stuff, and all the projections, all the technical studies, you know, the scientific studies as to the effect of an impact have been verified, because they said basically you need to fire a squashed up drone out of a cannon before it does any damage. Hey, that's exactly what happened. We had a frangible drone, it hit a helicopter, hit the rotor blade, and the result was nothing really happened. So yeah, it's a good day for the hobby.
Lots of people argue otherwise.
And also, you got to figure, Bruce, that most of the regulations that we've got now were built based on feelings. I mean, there was a lot of hysteria.
Yeah, and the even better thing is, from a regulatory perspective, if we look at this and say, if that drone had been registered, would it still have collided with the helicopter? Yes, of course it would. So regulation doesn't prevent any kind of that accident. And they only recovered one motor and the end of an arm. So would registration have helped them track down the person responsible? No, it wouldn't. And the helicopter reportedly was at 500 feet. So the person operating the drone already proved that they had either no understanding or no regard for the regulations. So would more stronger, more sort of complex regulations, would they have solved that or prevented that happening? No, they wouldn't. So regulation isn't the answer either.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree. Chad, you've spent a lot of time in your younger days in a fetching colour of green. Did you ever hitch a ride in a Black Hawk, and how would you have felt if your Black Hawk was whacked by one?
Well, I rode in Chinooks, but yeah, I wouldn't have been too concerned. Like Bruce said, I think I'm baffled that we only hit as many birds as we do. So I don't know. I don't.
And we all know that it takes a softball to bring down a Chinook.
What? I'm not familiar with that one.
That's actually happened in Rhine-Main in Germany. There was a Chinook that was brought down by a softball that was pop-flied in the approach path of a Chinook, and it got the blades out of sync and it went down.
Whoa!
Really?
What? Smack them?
I did not. Never heard of that. Wow.
Well, this was back when I was in the Air Force, and that was like another lifetime ago. So, you know.
Wow, I know they do find the Chinooks do find creative ways of crashing. I know that for sure.
Yeah.
And that's got to be one of the better ones. Craig, let's just do a microphone test. You've been and gone. Oh dear. Oh dear. So I think the best solution for your issue there, Craig, is to open a bottle of wine. I think that is possibly the only thing you can do. And that's whatever, you know, it'll work. Yeah, it is surprising, isn't it, that this is the first strike, and the person there was, I think there was a TFR in force for the around the flight. I think there were some sort of ceremonial duties as well. So there's a couple of strikes against the fellow doing it. And
hello.
Will there we are. You're there. He's arrived.
Am I finally on?
You are, yes.
I've restarted the computer twice. It's been just a nightmare. All that for the next 7 minutes.
There you go. Well, that's good. That's really good because it means you can't waffle on. That's fantastic. Craig, let's quickly go to you then, Craig. Operational safety cases. Well, here we are, and I put it down in your last article. You had a great thing about knowing the operational limits of the aircraft and knowing them more than the manual and stuff like that. And this time you spoke to sort of awareness of the situation and things like that. And this Black Hawk thing is, well, where would fly not? What is the operational safety case for being in the same? How do you mitigate the risk of flying in airspace with an aircraft from an OSC point of view?
Yeah, it's quite difficult. I've flown in Black Hawks, actually. I flew in Black Hawk helicopters regularly, low level in Afghanistan, when I was working out there with the US Army. So I've got a good understanding of what it's like to be kind of on the other end, although there was no drone threat in Afghanistan. There were other threats, things in the air, but they were being aimed at you on purpose. When it comes to drones, it's very difficult because I kind of caught a bit that Bruce was talking about, where the fact is that low-level military traffic and drone users, whether they are commercial or prosumer consumer users, their worlds overlap now, whether they realise it or not. And particularly in the UK, there are a lot of military low-level routes which regularly come down to 250 feet, fast-moving, jet traffic, flying down valleys in Wales. They arrive quickly with almost no warning, and it's very difficult because your average commercial operator is going to be on the side of the hill. They'll be focused on what they're doing, and then all of a sudden they've got to deal with a confliction that literally has got a split second for them to make a decision about what it is they're going to do. Now, it's difficult to build a safety case to sort of mitigate against that. And I think we're going down the right route with unmanned traffic management systems, albeit proprietary at the moment. And there's some interesting debates going on about UTM. I think we've still got a bit of way to travel on it because there are there are a number of concepts basically which are spooling up in in the States, in Europe, in Far East, and probably in Australia as well. I think there's a couple of systems out that way, and but all of them, they seem to be operating in their own little silo. So I'm not quite sure how much commercial interaction there is going on between regions, between continents. And all I'm concerned with about this is that it's going to take a long time to evolve these systems when the need is like now. And, regulators are. I'm not suggesting that regulators are resistant to such to these calls, but they have a very difficult balance to strike because these UTM software providers are commercial entities and they've got business plans to follow. And the regulators aren't really playing at the same pace. The regulators will go at their pace, albeit glacially at some times.
We've had one of them unmasked. I'm not going to mention names, but anyone that follows the forums will know what I've had. We've had one of them was unmasked this week. We've known their intentions for a long time. They very much have. Well, to my mind, they've done two things. They've mapped the world from an aviation sense very, very poorly. The information that they provide is generally wrong, and so I find that pointless. You might as well have no information, aviation map information at all. And they try to enforce an RFID sort of solution for the aircraft for identification, and they've lobbied for various bills in America that would allow individual states to make that happen. I think you probably know what I'm talking about, don't you, Gene? Maybe you haven't been keeping up with it. You do know, yeah. So you hit the nail squarely on the head with the UTMs is the commercial interest, and I should think for some regulators it'll be a great help for them if someone comes along and says, I have here the magic bullet. Buy this from us and we'll sort everything out for you and your life will be better. And I hope that regulators are not being dazzled by the bright lights of software providers from Silicon Valley. And this has, again, we can pull it all the way back to FPV and normal standard model aircraft flying. The the rest of your world there, Chad. A lot of people want to put an age limit of 16 on this, and that'll be tragic. If they do that, that'll be, well, yeah, I would hope anybody. Hang on, I'll go and get my rant horse out. I'm getting on it, aren't I? But I would hope that anybody that's in the commercial drone industry would never support that, because it's just so short-sighted. If you age restrict it, it's ridiculous. And anyone that's in the commercial drone world that supported it, well, I wouldn't want anything to do with them. But anyway, I'll stop ranting. Who's going to pick up the rant stick? Here, I'll hand the rant stick over.
Oh, just a question for Craig, actually. You're saying, like this military traffic now, 250 feet or something like that. Surely this doesn't take place outside of prescribed corridors. I know there's stuff in Wales. I've got all those, places where they can do the low flying with jets. So surely this situation is only specific to certain areas. Can't you make those excluded to drones so that someone flying in the park in town at 300 feet isn't going to pose a danger to military helicopters flying overhead? As I said, I think a couple of weeks ago, the real watershed in terms of drone regulation and drone control will come when they start passing regulations that apply to manned aviation to reflect that unmanned aviation has a place. As far as I'm aware at the moment, there's been no regulations affecting manned aviation, which are there solely because of the existence of unmanned aviation. At some stage, we've got the transition going on. Unmanned aviation has a place, and if we don't start making rules to ensure that manned aviation doesn't pose a threat to it, or vice versa, then we are going to have this UTM problem. So why not just say, well, we know there are drones at 300 feet and below, so we have to now realize that sometimes we can't allow manned aviation to travel through there. Even if it's convenient, it's not safe. So therefore, previously you could do that, but now you can't, because there's a much higher risk of hitting a drone. Therefore, you have to take that responsibility yourself as a manned aviator. And the regulations will have to reflect that, won't they?
Yeah, so there was a lot in there, but I'll do my best. The point I want to put on there was the point you made about between the manned and unmanned, aviation sectors. You're right; it is very much skewed towards the manned aviation sector. The perception being that we've been around for 100+ years, and you've got to fit into our world. Well, the unmanned aviation sector is a component of this new emerging aviation dimension, and we're here to stay. And potentially, we're going to be bigger in terms of volume than manned aircraft. Certainly, further down the line. Now, in terms of the first point you made, which is about military traffic using known routes. In theory, yes. So in a hypothetical nirvana, that would be the case. Now, the UK is very congested in terms of its airspace. And military traffic, essentially, the whole of the UK is what's referred to as low-flying area, with the possible exception of central London, for obvious reasons. All other areas can be used for military low-level flying. They're separated into what are called low-flying areas, which are numbered. Some are used more than others. There are low-flying routes which have flow direction, so they're one-way traffic, normally up valleys in a particular direction, and they are well known in the aviation community. But military helicopters routinely go off route, and they'll fly at 250 feet minimum separation distance from the ground in pretty much any direction they want, and it becomes essentially a free fall. It's general aviation. They've got to mix in with everyone else. Microlight aircraft, general aviation guys coming out of small aerodromes in the middle of nowhere, who are just literally going up to have a look round. Hot air balloons, and a whole range of other general aviation users, all of whom are using Class G airspace in the CNBC principle, and flying and manoeuvring around each other. And that has always been the case in the UK. It's pretty much the same throughout the world, as it were. And the situation has got dramatically more complex since in the last couple of years with the advent of unmanned aircraft. Because all of a sudden, what you have are, you don't have a controlled environment of aviators who are licensed and regulated, and with equipment that is also licensed and regulated. What you suddenly have now are vast numbers of people who don't come from an aviation background. They don't understand the aviation mindset. They don't understand principles such as airmanship and flight safety. And all of a sudden, they've encroached into that world. And that's the real challenge, I think, that faces us all at the moment, because all of the key stakeholders in the aviation dimension are all struggling to come to terms with the new reality. And the new reality is that unmanned aviation's here. And we discuss it, and we kind on this forum particularly, we kind of go around the same old boy. We speak about the same subjects, mainly because they're the real discussion points and the things that we're all trying to sort of rationalize and thrash out. And I'm not quite sure how much this actually does it, but hopefully I'll get people thinking.
Well, I mean, we can encourage Chad put in the aviation piece, and dear viewer, you won't see the rude and crude comments that have been directed towards me with my map folding and unfolding skills. I was looking on our internal chat here, where basically that's the UK, and anything over here, anything can happen. That's Wales. And anything can happen in Wales for many, many reasons, not just low-flying aircraft. So there's big warning signs all up and down. No, I was looking to see if the civil chart had the flow arrows, which it doesn't. I couldn't remember. But yeah, there are on the military half-mil charts. There are flow arrows up and down the valleys for various bits. So that's why I was rattling them out. But you did have an operator in the UK recently actually filed an airprox, the ARPAS operator, because a military helicopter flew underneath him. So instead of the normal in the newspaper, drone nearly hits aeroplane, it was aeroplane nearly hits drone, and the operator mitigated risk correctly. He didn't descend, he stayed out of the way, but he felt the need to say, hey, because he was doing a NOTAM thing, I think, wasn't he, Craig? He actually had all the correct paperwork and sorted himself out, and still a military helicopter arrived over the hill and so reported him, which was a two-way street. And as
it was a great example of how a commercial drone operator should work, because he's licensed by the CA, he has a permission, he was operating in an area where he had published a NOTAM, he was operating safely and professionally throughout, and he had the moral courage, so to speak, which a lot of his commercial operator brethren may not have, to recognize that there was a close air proximity and reported it. And quite a lot of his colleagues, his peers in the industry, wouldn't have done that. They would have just assumed nothing really came of that. But the whole point of the aviation industry, and the reason why the aviation industry has got such a good safety record, is because they have an open reporting culture. They recognize that by understanding failure and potential failure and going through iterations of trying to understand that failure, they get better, they get safer. And this is where the drone industry, I personally think, and this is why I'm a big safety evangelist when it comes to drones. We have to start embracing, we have to start educating people towards that. For the collective benefit of all, we all need to start embracing that culture. We need to have the moral courage to report when something happens.
No, for sure. And Flight Test and Rotorwire, you guys are pretty good on the safety message as well. And Craig's alluded to, we always come back to, this chat always comes back round to training every single time. But I think that's basically the nub of the problem, isn't it? Who'd like to go back at that?
Well, we just recently had an incident. I don't know if any of you are aware of that. But it was, we even put it in the episode because I do have the belief of very much like what Craig was talking about, don't, record it. And we shared it. And Drew, in one of our episodes, he and Willie were, they kind of get on each other's nerves and they roughhouse, and Drew flew his quad at him and cut his ankle. And, up to that point, Rotor Riot has an immaculate safety record. The only other injury, and I say immaculate as far as hurting other people, the only other injury was Chad Nowak cut his arm messing with his own quad in Dubai. But other than that, our guys have always been safe, which is funny because we have this reputation of, being gunslingers or something. But yeah, we've always been safe. And I think it was more of a mindset than, it's not like we had safety briefings or anything. It's just we all shared that mindset of, be careful and don't hurt anyone. Like, we've broken some laws, and we've we've done some other things that people aren't happy with, but we're always willing to pay the fine or do whatever the repercussion is. But we're not willing to hurt someone. So I think a lot of it just has to do with the mindset. Can I
trip you up then with I was just going to trip him up with if he's broken the laws and all that. So would you have been flying near? Would you have been happy if one of your crew was flying near that Black Hawk?
Oh no, none of us would do that. That's no. When I say break a law, I mean like we'll go on property that might. I'm not going to incriminate myself, but
sure. But I mean, but you can I think we can just you can just quickly say it's a dumb idea. I foolishly said in my Black Hawk thing, you shouldn't get in the way of emergency aircraft. I should have said you shouldn't get in the way of any aircraft. It's anyway, Bruce.
We don't fly over cars, not intentionally. I can't say that the guys have never flown over a vehicle, but definitely was never intended.
Someone landed on one in the last video, Chad.
Actually, that wasn't one of our guys.
Wasn't it? Oh, okay.
That was a professional baseball player.
Oh, right. Yeah, I'm the same. I've broken a number of the regulations. I've done it on purpose, and I've showcased it. One example was my old man flying in the park videos in New Zealand. If you want to fly FPV, you must have an observer, and the rationale given for that is to avoid potential conflict with manned aviation. So here I am flying under the trees and through the branches and things, and I deliberately made it very clear that it was me flying, there was no observer, and almost challenged our regulator to do something about it, because I believe that the regulations are very coarsely grained and they don't take into account many factors. And I would love to see them come and trying to explain to a court why I was somehow doing something wrong because I didn't have an observer when I was flying through a bunch of trees, and I'd like to explain where the planes were going to come from and why this little mini quad would be their biggest issue if they were in the trees with me. And of course, nothing happened. Nothing. The regulators aren't stupid. And I had a quiet chat off the record with a CAA official, and he said, well, you didn't hurt anyone, you didn't put any lives in danger. Really, we've got a lot more things to be worried about than some old guy flying his little drone in a park amongst the trees, even if he is technically breaking the regulations. And that goes to show that there is some common sense in the organisations, but I despair that we have to have or rely on common sense. The regulation should be more accurate, should be more precise and more finely tuned, so that it takes into account of the fact that, you know, this is the situation. A regulation you can break with impunity is not a good regulation.
Well, yeah, and I do want to speak up real quick because I do have integrity. I'm sure that our guys have done some things, and now as soon as I said that, I thought back, and I know there have been some instances where our guys have not been, you know, perfectly good with vehicles and things like that. But anyhow, just putting it out there. I'm not saying we're perfect by any means.
Yeah, but you probably have. You use crazy example operational safety cases there, but he's wandering around in the background. It's just, but yeah, it's a safety filled. It should be a safety filled world that shouldn't get in the way of the fun, I suppose, is what I wanted to say very badly. Then, Craig, tomorrow, what's coming up in the final installment of your operational safety cases series?
Yeah, it's about basically just bringing all the safety components together and balancing out the equation, because a lot of people, I'm doing a lot of safety case generation with clients in the UK for congested areas, and a lot of them have a lot of imbalance in their safety components. So they do really well in some areas, and then they allow one particular part of the safety case to really weaken it. So it's really just talking about really immersing yourself in your safety case, getting the overlapping measures which support each other and interconnect. So, and it's already been, it's already out on LinkedIn. So capture it at your leisure.
Wilco, Roger. Does anyone look? We've gone 13 minutes over. Did anyone else have anything else that they wanted to speak to or about this morning, afternoon, or evening? Gene, here we go. Gene, I see your microphone.
Just chill, just laying back, listening to you guys. It's all good, man. It's all good.
What's Gene smoking?
Yeah, it's happy days with Gene. That's all good. That's all good. He's getting ready for another overseas trip. All right, then. With that, then, I'll call this escapade to a close. Thank you very much, Chad, for taking the time to join us and respond to my silly responses. Hopefully, you'll join us again and chew the fat and talk nonsense. Craig, it was nice while you were here. And Gene, very chilled, and the man in the future. Have you got anything? What's in your build shed at the moment, there, Bruce?
I've got lots of stuff to review, some high definition video stuff and bits and pieces. So I'll be very busy for the remainder of the week. But of course, the weather isn't cooperating. It's raining and blowing. So you know, that's life. It's spring, yay!
Yes, same here, and further around on the bottom half of the earth. Okay, guys, thank you very, very much indeed for taking the time to join us. Dear viewer, thank you very much. Like, subscribe, do all those other things I was supposed to say at the end of the video, and I'm very rubbish at doing. And hopefully we'll see you again at 2100 GMT next Tuesday. Cheers all. Bye-bye.
Thank you.